Does C4 Kaveh really make a difference? In this video, I show you how much a 60% Dendro Core damage increase actually is. Spoiler alert, it's nowhere near 60%. This is the second part in the Kaveh 101 series. If you want to learn all the basics, check out my Kaveh quick guide. To test C4 Kaveh's real-world damage increase, I first put C3 Kaveh in 4 different battles against the Ion Blight Drake. Also use this opportunity to simultaneously test how much Nilou, Deepwood Memories, and Flower of Paradise Lost increases Kaveh's bloom damage. Kaveh was equipped with the Mailed Flower and 2 2-piece EM artifacts with an ER Sands to help meet his large ER requirements. His setup changed when I tested Flower of Paradise Lost, but I'll go over all the details of that build later. To make sure I showcase Kaveh's max bloom damage in each scenario, I basically crippled everyone else in the team. I used C6 Kale as a battery with Favonius Warbow and 4-piece The Exile. I mainly used her burst to ensure Kaveh and Xingqiu could burst every rotation. I chose to refrain from using Kale's burst on the initial rotation to minimize any blooms that didn't belong to Kaveh. Speaking of bloom ownership, check out my Kaveh quick guide if you would like more details on this mechanic. I also have a couple YouTube shorts that summarize everything you need to know about bloom ownership and the basics of using Kaveh. The links are in the description. Next up, I chose Barbara with Prototype Amber and 4-piece Instructor. I originally chose this artifact set because I knew I wanted to test Nilou, and she increases all nearby characters' EM by 100 whenever they are hit by Dendro attacks, such as the self-inflicted Dendro attack from when Dendro Cores explode near a character. Although I don't know how often Barbara was actually able to proc the 4-piece Instructor bonus. For Nilou, I equipped her with the Dockhands Assistant and 2 2-piece HP percent artifacts. I use this pretty typical build since her Bountiful Core damage scales with her max HP. The damage bonus is maxed out when Nilou has 74,444 HP. So since I wasn't able to reach this cap, I went with HP percent artifacts that have EM substats. I used the Favonius Sword and Deepwood Memories on Xingqiu in all scenarios except the first. In this battle, I broke the 4-piece Deepwood Memory set by using a similarly spec'd Flower of Life off-piece. This way, his overall substats wouldn't change much. Xingqiu is really great at triggering the 4-piece bonus from Deepwood Memories, but in a normal combat situation, you should really only use this set on him if you don't have any other options. But in this scenario, I use him because of his extraordinarily consistent Hydro application and to keep Deepwood Memories' Resistance Shred active. So now let's get right to the results. I always like to run each test 3 times to get an average. In the first test, I only wanted to see what C3 Kaveh's raw Dendro Core damage looked like. He averaged just over 20k Dendro Core damage. Obviously, he could do a bit more Dendro Core damage with more EM. With Kaveh practically soloing the Drake, and without Deepwood Memories, on average, this took him 76 seconds to down the mechanical chicken. Although the average clear time and team-wide DPS isn't what this test is about, it does give a tad bit more insight. Now let's see how much Deepwood Memories' 30% resistance shred increases Kaveh's Dendro Core damage. Kaveh did about 4,000 more damage per core with an average of just over 24k. He was also able to down the Drake about 18 seconds faster, averaging nearly 58 seconds. Although 4,000 damage may not sound like a whole lot, keep in mind that this is per Dendro Core. This also means that the average Dendro Core damage increase that Kaveh sees with Deepwood Memories being utilized in the team is just over 20%, which is actually quite a significant increase. This illustrates the importance of properly using this artifact set in any Dendro reaction-based team. If you don't use Deepwood Memories in these teams, you're basically saying no thanks to an easy 20% damage increase, at least in Kaveh's case. It may change with other characters and reactions. Although, the damage increase also meant this team spent 24% less time battling the Drake when compared to the identical team without Deepwood Memories. Now into the Nilou and Flower of Paradise Lost tests. For the rest of these tests, Xingqiu was using 4-piece Deepwood Memories. Now the 20% damage increase from the set was nice, but the damage increase from upgrading the vanilla Dendro Cores into Nilou's Bountiful Cores is essentially a game changer. On average, this team only took 34.6 seconds to take down the Drake, and Kaveh did up to 35,776 damage per core in each round. An 11k damage increase is simply amazing. This led to a massive 47% damage increase over the standard Dendro Cores, although this likely isn't much of a surprise to Nilou owners. This just leaves standard Bloom teams in the dust, even with Kaveh's help. But now let's see how much Flower of Paradise Lost increases Kaveh's Bountiful Core damage. I wanted to keep Kaveh's EM as close as possible to his previous build, so for this build, he used the mailed flower again, and I intentionally chose a Flower of Life that doesn't have any EM in its substats. With changing his sands from ER to EM, this left him with 968 EM, which is 17 less than the previous build, but it's close enough. For these types of mad experiments, I usually redo a round with the Drake if I feel it's not consistent enough. But because I wasn't too worried about how fast I cleared the Drake in these tests, I didn't bother this time around. But this led to a very similar average clear time to the previous battle, just 35 seconds. Although it took nearly half a second longer to down the Drake, it still led to a damage increase, albeit a small one. This time around, the 40% damage bonus plus 100% bonus after 4 stacks only led to a 6.37% damage increase in Kaveh's Bountiful Core damage. So now that I have some combat data on C3 Kaveh, all I have to do is repeat all the same tests again with C4 Kaveh.
One eternity later.
The standard Bloom team without DM had an average of 21,611 max Dendro Core damage. Enabling Deepwood Memories on this team led to a 20% damage increase for Kaveh's Dendro Cores, averaging 25,963. Swapping out Barbara for Nilou led to a 44.74% damage increase, with the average peak Bountiful Core damage sitting at 37,579 in this test. This also led to an incredible 64% increase in team-wide DPS, even though Kaveh owned the vast majority of Blooms. It also took 41% less time to down the Drake with this team. The final team led to a 6.35% damage increase by swapping Kaveh's EM artifacts to the 4-piece Flower of Paradise Lost set. He nearly reached 40k Dendro Core damage with this build, although the average clear time had similar results as the C3 version of this test. This time, however, Kaveh's average clear time basically didn't change, despite the 6% damage increase. Now let's compare the results to see how much a 60% Dendro Core damage increase translates to a real-world scenario. In this first scenario, without Deepwood Memories active, this 60% damage increase is off by nearly a factor of 10. Kaveh C4 only led to a 6.83% damage increase to his Dendro Cores, a very similar result to the FPL test results. The second scenario with 4-piece Deepwood Memories active had a nearly identical increase of 6.8%, although moving to the Nilou teams led to even less of an increase. Both Nilou teams had a 5% damage increase, so on average, Kaveh C4 led to a 5.62% damage increase to his personal Dendro Core damage. Now this could seem deceiving, being as his C4 clearly states that his Dendro Core damage is increased by 60%, but Genshin's damage formulas are likely much more complicated than you think. This is why it's important to do your research before getting your hopes up that a certain buff might drastically improve a character's combat performance, especially when it comes to a character like Kaveh. I love Kaveh, so I was hoping for a substantial increase to his damage after unlocking his C4. Unfortunately, his C4 is by no means a game changer, but every little bit helps, although seeing nearly 40k Dendro Core damage did make me wonder, how much damage is my Kaveh capable of? In this team, Kaveh's build stayed nearly the same as before, but he had slightly more base EM with 1029. Xingqiu and Nilou's build stayed the same, but this time around I used Nahida instead of Kale. I wanted to see what Kaveh alone was capable of, so I refrained from using her skill. Nahida is only being used for her burst to increase Kaveh's EM. I know I didn't really need to increase her EM in this situation because Kaveh already has over 1k, but whatever. I do what I want. But with this team, I set my own personal Dendro Core damage record with C4 Kaveh dealing a maximum of 43,236 in all 3 rounds. I'm pretty sure that is even higher than my top Hyperbloom damage. Now to wrap up this mad experiment, I wanted to see how fast I could down the Drake using everyone in the team. I knew ER wouldn't be an issue for this test, so in a lengthier battle, this team might need more energy recharge. Xingqiu isn't using Deepwood Memories anymore, and I'm now able to use Nahita's skill, so she's using the Deepwood Memories build. I built her with as much EM as I could to maximize her Dendro Core damage. I actually tried 3 different variations of this team, all with very similar results. I wasn't sure who would make the best use of the Flower of Paradise Lost set, so I tried it on everyone. As you can see, they were all pretty identical, but the best results were with Kaveh using FPL. In these tests, I didn't want Nilou stealing any blooms for herself, so I activated Bountiful Cores with her attack stance instead. The fastest this Nilou team was able to down the Drake was in 19.79 seconds. Something that I found really odd with this team though, is that Kaveh's max Dendro Core damage was a bit lower than the last team. I tried to figure out if he wasn't able to reach the max stacks of Flower of Paradise Lost, but with Nahita and Xingqiu stealing most of the blooms, that was a pretty tall order. But it's pretty hard to tell when Kaveh triggered his first bloom. You can see why I performed all the other tests the way I did. Kaveh's Dendro application is pretty slow, so it's easy for other Dendro characters to steal his Dendro application and subsequently his Dendro Cores. I have plenty more Kaveh deep dive videos planned, like his best teams, weapons, and artifacts. I'll test and rank each category in the same way I compared his C3 to his C4, although in those videos I'll focus more on the details of each subject rather than focus so much on the individual tests, like I did in this video. I really like to make these types of comparison videos, but I also have plenty of detailed guides, with plenty more on the way. If you're new here, make sure you get subscribed so you don't miss any new content. I really appreciate you for making it this far in the video. I'll catch you in the next one. Subscribe.